meeting of the Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee this morning. This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today, and therefore may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting is concluded, and should anyone else also wish to view it. To confirm, as a Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notification or request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphones muted when not talking so there aren't any interruptions encountered. May I also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask you all, please, to use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? Thank you. Moving on to the agenda, could Jade, our Democratic Services Officer, confirm if we have any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Could I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Best isn't online at the moment. Councillor Cowles?
Yeah, I'm a Governor of Aberystwyth Second Comprehensive School and also Glenavon Heritage Primary School, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria Hawler?
Parent Governor at Yscol Panteg.
Thank you. Councillor Jones? Janet Jones?
I'm a Governor at Glenavon Heritage School.
Thank you. Councillor Price?
No, Chair.
Thank you, Caroline. Myself, I've just been put on approve. Councillor Tew isn't here. Councillor Thomas? Colette?
No, Kevin, school and
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, Governor at Aled of the Angels Primary School in Old Cwmbran and Cwmbran High School.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams is absent. So. Thank you for that, everyone. Takes us to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of February 2024. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to the report we received on pupil attendance and exclusions. Please could I ask members to confirm that the minutes are an accurate account of the meeting? If anyone, all in favour of receiving those minutes? Anyone against? Any abstentions? They carried, thank you. Agenda item 4, action sheet. Please could members confirm if they have any questions and whether they are happy to note the action sheet. Okay, right, there's one action that hasn't been actioned, isn't there, I think?
Yes, Chair, it's just the one, so I'll chase that up and hopefully it'll be, we can take it off before the next meeting.
Thank you. Members happy to note the action sheet? Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 5, the EAS business plan progress update over the last year, including Torfaen Annex, specific priorities and progress against Estyn Recommendation 1. The purpose of this report is to look at progress against the EAS business plan, which can be linked to and looked at the same time as our progress made to Estyn's Recommendation 1. To improve outcomes for learners, particularly in secondary schools, as these components link together. The report also includes as an appendix outcome data for Torfaen secondary schools as published by the Welsh Government for the first time since 2019. May I welcome, Richard Clark isn't online at the moment, is he? The executive member, he did have an invite, but can I welcome Andrew Powell, our Director of Education, Andy Rothwell, Head of Learning and Achievement, Ed Price, and Deb Hartwell to the meeting. Can I ask officers if they could provide members with a brief overview of the main points of the report and because we've got lots of questions.
Okay, good morning, members. So I'm Andrew Powell, Director of Education. So Andy is here as our Head of Learning and Achievement for the local authority. So we work together closely with EAS to support schools and make sure that they've got the right level of support and challenge to address any recommendations that come up with their inspections, but also to work with them and address any issues that come up as they're going through natural working. Deb's going to talk through the overview of the report at the start, but I'm sure Deb and Ed just want to give a quick update of what their roles are.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Debbie Hartfield. I'm Managing Director at the EAS. It's really nice to be here this morning. And Ed is Assistant Director within the EAS, leading on policy and performance. If you're happy, Chair, for me to start with a brief overview? Yeah. Okay. So we were really grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this report with you, and as the Chair says, there are lots of questions, which is always good for us to be able to give an account of our work to yourselves in scrutiny. So this report that we've prepared jointly with the local authority is going to give you an overview of the progress that's been made towards specifically the Torfaen priorities within the EAS business plan. And those priorities are derived, as you are well aware, I'm sure, from your own education service priorities. So we're going to give you, the report gives you an overview of those. It also incorporates, as you'd expect, the progress that the local authority with ourselves are making towards ESTIN recommendations, particularly that first one around standards, as the Chair has already said, and the annex that Ed has provided and is able to take questions on gives some specific overviews, particularly around the end of Key Stage 4 data. I think what's important, particularly to note as part of this report, is that whilst we've shared with you, and appropriately so, the end of Key Stage 4 report for your schools across the local authority, I think that needs to be viewed not as the only piece of evidence about how your secondaries are performing. That's part of the picture, but there's a much broader spectrum. We've touched on it in some parts of the report, a much broader spectrum now that across Wales we'd be expected to look at, particularly around the quality of teaching and the quality of leadership. But nevertheless, it does form a part of that picture. So we're here today to answer as honestly and as fully with LA colleagues any questions that you have on the paper that we've provided to you. Thank you.
Do you wish to say anything? No, that's fine. That will take us straight to the questions then. So may I invite members to ask their questions. If there's an absent member and an allocated question, we will pass it around, okay? So I've got the first question, and it relates to 3.5. Why are schools in ESTIN category not part of the Celebrate, Share, Support and Refine, CSSR, teaching approach, and what processes are in place to share information and best practice across Torfaen?
Okay, so all schools have the opportunity to take part in the elements of this process. In effect, it's supported self-evaluation within schools. So those schools that are in a category or are having higher levels of support, regardless of being an ESTIN category, will have significant support from their school improvement partner and a range of teams within the EAS and the local authority. So off the top of my head, I can think of a secondary school where, as a joint piece of work, we went in to look at leadership within departments, we looked at resource bases, we looked at teaching and learning across the school, and that was a joint piece of work between EAS and local authority. That, in effect, was a CSSR approach, and from that, we worked closely to agree a joint report with the school about what are the strengths and what are the areas for development within the school, and then revise the school development plan. So that's an option open to all schools. Those that we feel need additional support, we will always encourage them to work closely with us to have supported self-evaluation. The CSSR is more of an optional piece of work for those schools that are actually high performing and they just want to perhaps focus on very specific issues. But I just want to assure you this is not limited to a certain group of schools. This approach has supported self-evaluation and supported school development planning and the implementation of the plan. That's open to every school, and that's a fundamental part of our joint working.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. My question relates to paragraph 4.3. Abersaconn School, a focus on ALN is referred to in the implementation column. Oh, beg your pardon, I've jumped a column. The positive impact is pleasing to see, but you already state that it's in its early stages of development. What would be an appropriate time to evaluate this impact?
Okay, so Abersaconn, there's a new head teacher in place, and so we have at least a half-termly meeting with the head teacher to support him in the new developments that he's putting in place. As a routine part of that work, we would always find out his view on the progress that's being made and any changes to support that need to happen. So in effect, every half term there's a check-in, and that's to support the head teacher that he's satisfied with the progress. We're satisfied with the progress. All schools have at least an annual meeting with us where we'd look at their school development plan and would look at their progress from previous recommendations, the progress of their current school development plan and progress against what was in the plan for the previous year. There are some schools where we will have that on a termly basis, and we actually do that with all secondary schools in Torfaen, because we recognise it was an Eston recommendation to improve outcomes in all secondary schools. So that's a standard offer, and all schools engage in that. The feedback we've had is they really welcome that, because it's an opportunity to let us know is that the LA and the EAS, is the support right for that school? And if it's not, what can we do to support the head teacher to address and get the right level of progress and timely progress? For some schools where we know there's a bit more work to do, we might do it half-termly. But it's always got to be at the right level of support for the school. We don't want a meeting for a meeting's sake, because that pulls staff away from developing practice within the school. We want this to be a constructive and collaborative approach with the schools, the LA and the EAS. So I can't give you a date, but I can just assure you that everything's monitored on either a half-termly, a termly, or an annual basis, centrally. Saying that, school improvement partners are in regularly within schools. And we also have an overview of schools' performance as a general piece of work that takes place every half term. And within that, we'll look at things like finance, we'll look at the conditions of the building, we'll look at governor vacancies, we'll look at general feedback on the quality of teaching and learning. And if we think we have questions or we need to explore something in a bit more detail, we will contact that head teacher and we'll have that discussion then and there. So it's quite holistic and fluid progress support that's always evidence-based. We know that in the past, perhaps schools have been left alone when they shouldn't have. And my absolute vision is this is a collaborative process that's a safe space for the schools, the LA and the ES, to just be honest about what's working, what isn't. And that goes for all of us. So it's all three partners, make sure that we're working effectively together.
Okay, Janet. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, sorry, Deb. Go.
Just to add to that point, particularly around Abersaconn, I visited the school earlier this week to meet with the relatively new head teacher. He's been in post for some time now, to talk about the specific support that the EAS is providing into the school. And like Andrew said, to have that honest and open dialogue with the school. Sometimes the best plans don't always work, and we have to be honest with each other about that and try something different. So my purpose in visit to the school was to see if the head was receiving what he needed, whether that was having the desired impact, and also to talk about some things that maybe the head had not considered. So one of my actions leaving the school was to send details around our most recent strategy for improving the quality of teaching. And since that visit, the school has now engaged and is sending one of their senior members on that professional learning. So I think it is about that touch base informally, but also, as Andrew has said, that formal process that sits over the top of everything. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Thomas?
Thank you, Chair. 4.3 at a second school. A focus on ALN is referred to in the implementation column, but there's no mention of it in the impact statement. Would you be able to provide an update?
Yeah, so one of the things we focused on with all schools was about the implementation of the ALN transformation work, and particularly about moving of learners from the old SEN code onto the new ALN framework and mandatory year groups. We've talked about that previously within scrutiny. So part of the monitoring we'll do with all schools, including with Aberystwyth, is looking at, is that transfer going at the right pace, following the guidance sent from Welsh Government, and satisfied in all schools that is happening at the correct pace.
Okay. I've got the next question. It's relating to 4.3 as well. Would you be able to provide more detail regarding the impact of the high-level actions which you mentioned to support Cwmbran High School, as there doesn't seem to be as much detail as for the rest of the secondary school?
Okay, so Cwmbran High has just had a full monitoring report from Estyn. This is publicly available and it's now on the Estyn website. It was published, I think, on the 7th of March. I'm really pleased at the feedback we've had from Estyn. It talks specifically about the strengthened leadership within the school, particularly at a senior level, and the impact that's having on the quality of teaching, quality of learning, behaviour, and about its impact on some of the structural changes that the head teacher's pushing through. It's quite a lengthy report. It looks at all the recommendations from the previous inspection, but it also looks at some of the wider core elements of inspection that need to take place, such as safeguarding, healthy eating, all aspects of a core inspection. It's really clear from there that the school's making progress, appropriate progress. We know this school has been in a statutory category for a long time, but I'm really encouraged about the report. I mean, Andy was at the Estyn feedback. Is there anything you want to particularly comment on?
Good morning, everybody. The Estyn feedback, yeah, it was positive. They recognised that, I think as Andrew's already mentioned there, that the structure of leadership in particular was now in place, and that was enabling growth in the school and movement in the school. They recognised that the school knew itself really well, and they knew the school now knows what it needs to do to improve further. It was a positive meeting, but it was honest and reflective in terms of where the school is and where it needs to go next.
Follow on from that, Cwmbran High School, the impacts within the table appear to contradict the outcomes of the recent Estyn report. I've read the Estyn monitoring report. So it seems more positive in the report than it does in the Estyn report when I read it. Would you like to comment on that?
Can you give a specific about what you think is different, please?
I was thinking of previously it was grassroots. It's 6 years since the school's been in special measures, and when I left the school, it was grassroots starting to show. And the report, Estyn monitoring report, seems that grassroots are starting to show, and we haven't moved on very far. So I just wondered, the extent of the support going in and the time that we're using. I mean, when previously it was they required at pace, and 6 years isn't very fast.
Can I start? So the new head teacher's been in post for about a year and a half. Absolutely, progress in previous years wasn't fast enough, but it was really hampered by several changes of headship and several changes of approach to developing teaching and learning. recently, the governing body's been re-established. That was the IEB was removed in January, so there's now a standard governing body in place. Eston commented on how they valued the incremental approach we had taken to expanding the IEB, expanding the shadow governing body, making sure professional learning was in place, and it wasn't just a quick handover. So I think what has destabilised the school over the past 6 years was the frequent changes in headship, and there wasn't a governing body in place. So now the conditions for improvement are there, and what we're seeing is with the substantive head, substantive deputy, the new leadership team that they've both put in place, that's having an impact, and that's supported by a really strong governing body. Debbie, do you want to come in on something?
Yeah, completely concur. I think one of the things to note is, it just picking up on Andrew's point, is around the leadership, and that encompasses, as Andrew said, the head teacher, the deputy, the senior leaders, the middle leaders, the governing body, as is now, giving that consistent direction and appropriate pace. Completely take your point, 6 years is way too long. Completely accept that. There is that consistent leadership now in the school. And you talked about grassroots, and I take that as teachers and support staff, those people working in the classroom. They need to have the appropriate time and space and access to the right type of professional learning to help them to improve as well, and help them to reach the expectations that are set by the consistent leadership in the school. And I think it is important as well to note it's about having the right people in the right places for a long enough period to be able to sustain that change. And I think your point about, Chair, the previous report talking about grassroots, I think that was paused and restarted and paused and restarted. And now we've got that consistent message with accountability in place, people being held to account appropriately in a supportive way, and therein leads to then consistent and sustainable, which is important, improvement. And that's what I believe we're seeing in Cwmbran Haen now.
Victoria, question 6, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in relation to 4.7, and the question is, are you happy with the number of teachers accessing the various O-Level trainings, and what role does the EAS play in challenging schools regarding which members of staff are selected to attend the training?
So this was, the Levy training piece was a specific commission that Torfaen asked the EAS to do, particularly around improving the quality of teaching and learning in secondary schools. So it's a completely bespoke programme for Torfaen secondary schools, which is the first thing to say. I don't think that comes across in this. And that was something that was linked absolutely intrinsically to that recommendation from Eston about that improving secondary schools in the whole. So that's worth saying at the outset. The actual purpose of the training is actually that you start small and grow big. So we would have expected all secondary schools to take that option, and we wouldn't expect there to be a wholesale a number of teachers from each of the schools coming on that programme all at once. It's a bit of a slow burn. And you would expect the head teacher in the school to make those decisions. So whilst the EAS has a role with the school improvement partner in advising and guiding, head teachers are in the best place to know which members of staff are ready. Kind of refers back to the answer to the previous question, which staff members are ready for that, which they're able to release, because there's also difficulty, isn't there, about releasing staff for programmes. So which are the most appropriate to release, and which staff will gain the most from that programme within that period of time, and will be able to come back to the rest of the staff in the school and share their experiences and start infiltrating that learning across the school. So This won't be a one-off programme. We would expect this to continue. And we would also expect every school development plan in our secondary schools to have a focus on improving the quality of teaching, therefore improving the quality of learning. You'll notice in the report, which is probably what you're referring to as well, is that two of the schools, YG Gwynllw and St Albans, have at this point not chosen to access the Levy programme. And I feel really comfortable with that, because both of those schools have a robust programme to develop their teachers and the quality of teaching and learning in those schools. Gwynllw, as you know, has just been brought out of category, and they are accessing a specifically Welsh language programme that the local authority has commissioned through us to develop teaching and learning through the medium of Welsh.
Thank you very much.
Colette, I think the next question's been answered, unless you've got something to add to it. Okay. Thank you. That was about the two schools that you just mentioned. Reading our minds. The next question is Councillor Jane Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, the schools that do access the Levy programme, do they need to pay for it, or is it funded through the local authority?
Yeah, so last summer I met with all the secondary head teachers with Kirsty Bevan from EAS. We said the LA will fund this. We will fund a teaching and learning programme for you on top of the work that you already get through EAS and work that you would commission independently. So we talked about what programmes would you want. We actually put a range of options to them. And the feedback we got from the head teachers was that they wanted to pursue the Levy model as the preference, but as you see, two of them wanted to go a different route. So this element is core funded from the local authority as an additional contribution from schools. However, there will be a number of them already accessing the Levy programme and other teaching and learning programmes based on what they want. So this is a top-up for secondaries funded just from the LAS.
I'll go back on Colette's question, if you don't mind. So are we getting feedback from the other two schools that are not on the Levy?
Yes, so that would form part and parcel of the discussions that the local authority has with all secondary schools. It's a choice the local authority has specifically made around those professional discussions and team around the school. And the focus very much is always around how are you enabling your teachers and your support staff to improve their professional learning and the quality of teaching in the school. And the school improvement partner, that becomes part of the dialogue. And if there were issues or concerns around that, they would be brought back through those discussions or via the school improvement partner directly to the local authority.
Thanks, Deb. Yeah, I mean, just to bring that to life, I was in Gwynllw last week with colleagues from EAS, and we talked exactly about that, the support that they're having around developing teaching and learning. Is it hitting the mark? What next? How can we improve it for you?
Or it works better than the Levy. You know, it's about feedback and monitoring.
Yeah, I mean, it's about schools' need, as Deb said. You know, schools know themselves, heads know through their self-evaluation processes what the specifics are that they need. I don't think it's necessarily about one being better than the other. I think it's about best fit.
I was thinking more of the St Albans choice as well. So there we go. Question 9 is Councillor Coles, please.
Thank you, Chair. What has the attendance and feedback been like regarding the face-to-face and virtual termly EAS workshops?
Yeah, 4.9 in the report.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't hear the first part then of that. I've got it now, Councillor Coles.
That's all right.
So we meet regularly with head teachers, both in partnership with the local authority and through our sort of individual catch-up meetings that we have with head teachers. And it was certainly one of the things that I talk about when I go around to head teachers as well. I have to say that attendance has not been where we need it to be. in those specific sessions around self-evaluation and improvement planning. But I'm also a firm believer in head teachers will make decisions about what they feel is appropriate for them at the right time. So what we have continued actually from the COVID learning is to record the sessions that we have, and head teachers and senior leaders in schools are able to access on demand that professional learning, as well as attend it either in person or in those live virtual sessions. The way that we test out actually the impact of particularly our advice and guidance around school improvement planning and self-evaluation is particularly through the work of the school improvement partner. And the key to all of this is making sure with the head teacher that they're identifying the right priorities for improvement. We all know that if we're working on a plan and the priorities are not the right ones, we're not going to see improvement in the areas that we need to see. So the whole crux of this training around self-evaluation and improvement planning and the conversations we have continually are asking school leaders, not only head teachers and governing bodies, how do you know? So how do you know that that's a priority? What evidence base are you using? And are the actions that you've got in your school development plan precise enough to enable that improvement to be seen in the appropriate timescale? So it is, 4.9 does talk about, Councillor Cole, those virtual sessions, but I think it's much broader as well, actually, than just those sessions. That conversation is an ongoing one, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liam. Councillor Janet Jones, question 10.
Thank you, Chair. This question relates to paragraph 4.12, the implementation of the professional governor pathway. You confirm that 12 governors within Torfaen have attended the professional learning class, paragraph 4.13. But could you confirm how many Torfaen schools are represented by this figure?
I don't have the data in front of me, but I would imagine it is one governor per school, but I can check that detail out for you from those 12. I think the main concern for us is we recognise that the governor pathways are additional. There's the core programme that governors have to attend, but it could have been training that you attended once 10 years ago in terms of the induction. We just want to encourage more and more governors onto these programmes because we know that the governors who do attend them value them incredibly. We've just done some videos from 3 chairs of governors from across the region talking about the programmes, which we will push out to all governors to show the benefits. That's the key for us.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Question 11 is Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. So this is in reference to 4.14. Have governors been asked for feedback in terms of any barriers of them attending trainings offered or accessing the hub, as attendance is an issue?
Yes, we do an annual survey of governors. One of the elements that governors give us regular feedback on is the lack of video recorded sessions, but we know that 95% of our training is available as recorded sessions. That puts the onus on us in communication. I think with governors that sometimes an email out, which we do regularly on a monthly basis to say this training available, here is the hyperlink, is still not enough for all governors. What we know is that when we attend physical meeting, talk to governors, such as my attendance at TASC last week, that's when messages get out. And I think through word of mouth with governors, if chairs are promoting the benefits of attending training with all of their governors, asking about what training people have attended, it's the face-to-face engagement which encourages participation beyond our general electronic communications, however rich those are. So we are always looking for different ways to promote through different streams.
I think just as an addendum, I suppose, to Ed's points, the EAS can't do this alone. I think there are a number of governors across Torfaen Our voice alone is not going to be enough in this space to encourage governors to attend appropriate professional learning. And I'm saying that with a caveat around it's voluntary, they're busy people, and we want to keep the governors we've got in our system and expand it. But this needs to be a real collective drive from the head teacher, the chair of governors, other governors, us, of course, the local authority, yourselves. So I think that there is some work to do in this space to get that governor engagement where it really needs to be. And it's hard. It's hard stuff. There's no silver bullet here around this piece.
I think you're right, Deb. It is difficult, and yeah, we've got lots of contributing factors, I think, a bit like attendance, which support and help encourage governors to attend. But also there's, we're very conscious around governor recruitment as well. So we've worked with colleagues in EAS and with Ed's team to develop a page on the council website. It's a front-facing page. It directs people who are interested in the role of governor to various points of contact where they can talk to myself or Ed or Andrew to find out about what the role entails, how to go about applying. So we're really keen on that, and we're also trying to promote it through. We've done a number of member sessions over the course of the last 18 months. We talk a lot there because we recognise that most members are governors in some form or another about the opportunities of spreading that word of mouth message as well, and the training that comes through it.
Thank you, Andy. Victoria, would you like to ask the next question? It's linked to this.
Yes. So this is 4.16. Cluster training for governors appears to have resulted in high attendance rates as seen across Cilliog. Was feedback from this session positive, and may cluster training be an effective method of running more sessions in the future?
I'll start, but I know that Ed will probably want to come in here as well. The idea for this came from Ed and the team who ran in another local authority some cluster training. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. I think the shape of the training was really helpful in terms of bringing governors together from across a cluster to develop those conversations and networking opportunities, but also to do professional learning. We're in the process of, we're thinking at the minute that it's going to be one cluster per term on a rolling programme of probably 2 years. So we've got 6 clusters in Torvine. That would take a 2-year process to go around. We're in the process of hopefully setting up the next one for the summer. We're also really encouraging heads through their head teacher forums to share the messages around the positives about doing cluster-based training. So we've got feedback going there. Ed, I don't know if there's more.
Just to add, the powerful bit for me was that governors in the cluster don't have the opportunity to work together, and that was seen as a starting point or a launch pad. And I heard multiple conversations amongst chairs to say, we need to meet, you're welcome to visit my school, you're welcome along to come along to my governing body. So it's that relationship face to face again. So that's what we're hoping to achieve through that as the key point, is networking of governors together.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watkins, question 13.
Thank you. So are improvements in governor knowledge and understand and evaluated in any way to judge the quality of the professional learning with the governors?
The first point that we say we evaluate at the point of delivery in terms of the training. You'll know that we record all attendance, annoyingly so at times where we want your attendance recorded at all points because it's very powerful for you to have that one list. We do record feedback as well, and we evaluate that. You can print your own forms out now as a governor, so that when you've done the evaluation, you can have a PDF copy of that, so that you can bring that into the field. We overall evaluate them. We distribute them to chairs and heads. We do need to do more work at triangulating that in terms of the impact of the work of governors, because governors at the moment are self-reflecting on how it's impacted on their knowledge and understanding. It's triangulating the work of has it had an impact on the leadership within the school.
Just to add to that, around the evaluation piece as well, there are 2 bits really. Ed did a great piece of sharing with members and also with Cluster around the Eston thematic report for governors and the role of governors there. Really, really helpful and useful and well received. But on the Eston theme, actually, when we look back at all of the Eston inspections that we've had, certainly in the last 18 months, it might even go a bit further back than then, the role of the governor hasn't come out as a recommendation in any of the inspections. And in quite a few inspections, I'm thinking of Pontypridd in particular, it came out as a real strength. And I think that's that quality assurance that we're looking at those Essendon inspections, and that they're saying a similar thing to what we're seeing in terms of the role and effectiveness of the governing body. So in answer to your question around evaluation, I'd feel comfortable in the triangulation of looking at the different points and saying, yes, I think we have been effective in supporting governing bodies so far.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, question 14, please.
Thank you, Chair. My next question refers to paragraph 4.21 and identification of shortcomings. Are you satisfied that the necessary refinements and improvements have now been made in schools where there have been shortcomings have been identified?
That's really hard to answer. I'm going to be really honest with you. Just going back to a previous comment, is that where we know schools have got a bit more to do, we have closer monitoring them, and we will always check, have they made suitable progress within the monitoring times that we have. So, for example, schools that have been in a category for a long time, Welsh Government wanted multi-agency meetings put in place. This was a programme that was put in place a couple of years ago, where Welsh Government, Estyn, local authorities, consortium, the schools would attend, and there was an expectation of at least a half-termly meeting with those schools. And within that, a core aspect of the agenda is looking at progress of the school development plan, what's happened in the last 6 weeks, which is sometimes really challenging because that's a short amount of time for a school. But are they on track with their priorities? So those schools where we think there are no significant issues, like I say, we will meet with them annually on their school development plan. So we felt that's an appropriate time just to have a check-in. With all the secondaries, like I said, it's a termly check-in because we realise the secondary is a big beast of a school, and it's an Estyn recommendation from us to improve the outcomes. So we have a termly check-in, and going back to my previous comment, that's about, are we all doing the right thing? It's not just about the school. It's about the consortia of the local authority doing the right thing for the school. Is it impactful? And if it's not, what do we need to do differently? And then for some schools, it is a half-termly check-in. Where things are not going well, or as we would expect, options that we have are amending support under the school's cause and concern guidance. It may be about issuing a pre-warning notice or a warning notice and the use of statutory powers for schools. So going back historically, for Cumbrian High, that's why the IEB was put in place. That was the use of statutory powers requiring Welsh Government approval. We have no schools that have an active warning notice at the moment, and we have no schools where statutory powers are being actively used. So I'm satisfied with the progress that we have in place.
But there's still more to do, I assume, Andrew? Chair, I would say there's still more to do.
There's always more to do, and it's never about sitting back and feeling comfortable. We have to be constantly monitoring the schools and monitoring what we are doing and what is the support we're providing right. Things can change overnight in a school. Such a dynamic and complex system of school. The community, the children, the staff, it can change overnight. So we will absolutely never sit back and rest and not be on it because it's too risky.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, question 15.
Thank you. Outcomes for non-FSM learners in Torfaen is slightly below their peers in Wales. However, FSM learners in Torfaen have outcomes significantly higher than their peers in Wales. Is there an explanation for this? Are non-FSM learners being affected by the focus on FSM learners? 4.3, sorry.
This is information from the appendix really, on page 45. The tables, the charts that you see in there are 1 year only, so they are very limited range of data. you will see that that data from Welsh Government will grow over time, and it's the trends that we need to look at. Yes, it is a challenge, the difference between, and we know that our non-FSM perform equally with their peers. The gap, and this points to some of the data within your Wales Core data set, is that schools make the greatest difference to those learners who need the input and support the most. So the ones who have the greatest external challenges. And that, as part of our work, is encouraging secondary schools to focus on those areas, because it will have a positive impact on all learners as well. You are seeking to close a gap, but you're also pushing for the performance of all learners as well at the same time. So but you wouldn't just focus on the one group. It is a challenge to close that gap to similar levels across Wales and beyond.
Yeah.
What I'd also add is what I said in my introduction around this rightly gives us questions to ask, doesn't it? And I think that is an absolutely appropriate question to ask. And it's that type of question that is being tailored and asked in the professional discussions. So where individual schools at the end of key stage, like we're seeing here, have that discrepancy, and most schools will. The important thing is to see what they're doing to address it for year 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11. So by the time you're looking at the whole provision that the school has in place for disadvantaged and vulnerable learners, some of which fall into the bracket of RFSM learners. So it's a much more holistic question than just that end of key stage, but nevertheless an important one. So the professional discussions focus very much on, is that a priority in the school development plan? Keeps coming back to that. What evidence base are they using? And we would expect to see that evidence base be in the quality of vulnerable and disadvantaged learners' work in classrooms, the comments that they give back into senior team through listening to learner activities, and an evidence base that sits around their attendance, their exclusions, if appropriate, family engagement. It's a much broader piece. So whilst we're pushing the data, rightly so, for those learners to achieve the best they can in whatever qualifications are appropriate to them, what we want is that provision to be the best it can be for all learners. Therefore, all evidence will tell us that that end of key stage data will improve over time. But again, there's no silver bullet here. This is hard stuff. It's beyond a school. This is community. This is society-wide, isn't it? But this is the bit that we can talk with schools about and we can try to influence.
Question 16, Councillor Watkins, please.
Thank you. Moving on to 4.35. Now that school improvement partners are able to engage fully with schools following the ASARS, the Action Short of Strike, when do you expect to have fully caught up?
That's a good question. Caught up. So actually what I would say is that engagement in Torfaen with particularly primary schools during that period of Action Short of Strike action, engagement was actually quite yeah, okay. I'm not gonna, it was okay. It was slightly better than the comparators that I have across the other local authorities in the region, but it wasn't where we needed it to be, which is the point, I think, in this statement. So from the start of the spring term, so January, it was business as usual. But what we have made is a commitment through local authorities, through discussions with trade union partners, that we don't look back, we look forward. So we don't put expectations on schools for additional workload that we may have asked for during, say, the autumn term, whereby they were observing that strike action. But we start as we mean to go on, and that's what we're doing in all Torfaen schools now. We're working on a very clear programme of activity. All schools are engaging as we would expect them to. And it's kind of not a question about catching up. It's a question of knowing schools well. And some schools we don't know as well as we would like, because some of that action stemmed across 3 terms in some cases. So it is about us working actively, productively, positively. I think we're in a fair place with that, and I think things are moving. I would expect at the end of this term, which is quite short, we've only got another week, I think, left, all schools in Torfaen will have engaged in that programme of work, which is a really positive place to be, because we couldn't have said that at the end of the autumn term. And they are aspects beyond our control to some extent, aren't they?
Just to sort of emphasise one of Dev's points about the union involvement with this, there was a clear expectation, unions working with Welsh Government, and then clear messaging out that this wasn't about a catch-up, was it? It was about looking forward. And we are all really wary about head teacher workload. We know it's such a busy job, and there's a lot going on in the system. So we really want the engagement to be meaningful and positive, and we fully support that view of that, where the unions have worked with head teachers and with Welsh Government about it's looking forward, and it's about going from here.
Okay. Takes us to question 17, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. This question 17 is related to 4.37 and 4.38. With regard to the involvement of the Celebrate, Share, Support and Refine being voluntary, how effective is it, and what is the value of it? What is the value of using it? And have you received any negative feedback regarding this programme?
So, in terms of feedback, we'll start there. We haven't had any negative feedback that I'm aware of. In fact, quite the opposite, where schools have been part of the CSSR process. Head teachers have fed back to other head teachers in Torfaen through the head teacher meetings about the usefulness, supportedness, the way that it helped schools to understand where they were, the quality assurance, the fact that it was low stakes. You know, it wasn't about accountability, it was just about helping schools to get a better understanding. But the really powerful bit was where good practice was identified, schools were then able to, as it suggests, share that. And that then, we're trying to build that within Torfaen, the idea of sharing effective practice amongst schools and schools taking ownership over that. Schools have now done that, they are sharing their practice. So we're really, really pleased in terms of how the process has worked so far.
And I suppose just to add to that, head teachers have been part of designing the approach. So I think that's critical. It isn't something that has been designed in an office. Us knowing or thinking what's best for schools. This has been a real co-constructed programme and approach. And every time we do get feedback, whether that be a niggle in some area, not necessarily negative, we incorporate that into the next programme. So it really is an iterative programme that started as part of COVID and has now become kind of part and parcel of what we do. So I suppose it's assuring members that if there is something that comes through where a school has found it particularly negative or there's a real element that we need to take on board, that would be taken on board. And we would change the approach as a result of that feedback. So it's not set in stone. I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just perhaps to give a bit more sort of practical review of what it actually looks like. So the school will design the process. So they'll say, I'm going to be doing a learning walk, I want to look at books, I want to listen to learners. This is what I want the day to look like. And then staff from the consortium, maybe the LA, will come in and just work alongside. It's just an external pair of eyes. It's nothing additional for the school. It's what they are doing as their routine monitoring and evaluation. It's just having somebody external just as a quality assurance. And I think that's, like Andy said, that's what we want, because that's really helpful to all of us. And that's the process that we operate in some of our internal meetings. We just sense check each other, and about that sharing good practice. So we have regional LA meetings when we talk about attendance, talk about exclusions, and it's just that saying, have you thought of that? Or sharing some data and just think, well, you haven't picked up this. What do you think about this aspect? This is what the sessions look like. But it's designed by the school, and we fall in line with what the school wants. It's not a done-to model at all.
Okay. Question 18, it relates to 4.40, and I'll read it. In 50% of schools inspected, leaders need to ensure teaching extends opportunities to develop pupils' independent skills. In 55% of schools inspected, leaders need to sharpen or refine self-evaluation processes, more specifically on the impact of teaching and learning. The question is the above a particular issue within secondary schools, primary schools, or both? And what support has been put in place as a result?
So, the actual statement in 4.40, so we're picking up the need to develop independent skills, self-evaluation, and the impact on teaching and learning are coming out nationally, actually, in Estyn inspection reports. So you'd expect Torfaen to look at the outcomes from inspection reports and have an overview of the key themes that are coming out. We do exactly the same in partnership. We do the same across the region. Estyn do the same across Wales. So when we're looking at these elements that are coming out, I will come to your point in a minute, Chair, we are designing the approach that we take in Torfaen schools based on the need. So this is one part of that jigsaw. So that tells us that there's still more work to do, as we've said, on the quality of self-evaluation improvement planning. Independent learning is part of the quality of teaching and learning. It's one of those elements that make up effective teaching. And that's how we shape, with Torfaen, our offer of support. And your point, Chair, around phase specific, there's a general theme coming out across each of the phases. However, there are less secondary schools in Torfaen that have been inspected than primary schools in that period. But the national trend is fairly generic. So the quality of self-evaluation and improvement planning quite often needs to be sharpened. Because I think what we're saying here are these schools didn't require follow-up activity, but there's still more work to do, which I think was Councillor Jones's question to Andrew. Is there more work to do? There's still more work to do to sharpen it, to make it better, to make it more precise. And independent learning is a theme that's coming out across all sectors. And again, to give you a flavour for what that means, independent learning is about learners in a very kind of concise way taking control of their own learning. So we see that quite often in early years. We see that being built into the planning, that precise planning that teachers and support staff have. What we see generally then, as things go on, sometimes teaching can be over-scaffolded, it can be over-controlled, and I understand why that's the case sometimes. But this is about allowing learners to make mistakes for themselves, to learn from those mistakes, to know where to find that information, to know how to solve problems. This is all about that critical thinking. So again, that's something that we talk to schools about. And so in answer to your question, I've gone round the houses, but it is quite a generic theme that we're seeing coming out. But I would say that point refers to in the main primaries in Torfaen, but it's not specific across Wales in that way.
That concludes the report, and we're going on to Appendix 1 now, Torfaen Key Stage 4 Outcome Data. And question 19 is a general question. Members felt that Appendix 1 was very technical and difficult to digest, and that members of the public may have issues digesting it. Would you like to comment on the scope to simplify the document in future years?
Okay, I'm happy to start with this. I suspect Ed will want to come in. So this data is publicly available on the My Local School website. I think it's even more complex and hard to access on the My Local School website, to be honest. It is very technical, but this is the framework we're operating under. So schools will clarify on an individual basis what their priorities are in their school development plans with their community. But in effect, this is what it is. This is how we evaluate. These are the data sets that are produced by Welsh Government. We will always look to simplify things, but I would argue that actually this is a simplified version of what schools received and what is on the My Local School website.
I think this report and the technical nature, it reflects the fact that we have moved away, and this was from 2017-18 onwards, from a framework where we had A stars to C's to point scoring. Okay, there's a really clear rationale for moving to point scoring, and I know I did a workshop for members where we discussed this in detail. Point scoring is about valuing every learner, which I think we would all appreciate. The old system of A stars to C's became hijacked in a way, particularly by the press, where the C grade and above was paramount. Therefore, this system is trying to create something fairer, and evaluating schools in the fairest way possible leads to complexity. It would be simple if it was just league tables of schools in rank order, but we do not want to go there because that's not fair on schools or fair on our learners. Having said that, I will strive and look at the reports for next year to provide further clarification as much as possible within, as Andrew said, the Welsh Government framework within which we are working.
And it is complex.
Yeah.
If elected members don't understand it, how can they spread the word in the public domain, and how will they understand it?
I just want to emphasise the point that Debbie made at the beginning, is that this is one aspect of school performance, and it's important, but what's more important is the teaching and learning that takes place in the classroom every day, and that we know that's having an impact on learners. So, yeah, this is important, but it must be put in context.
And I'll take question 20 as is on the list. Caroline, would you mind doing 22 in a minute? Thank you. Question 20 is about the CAP 9. It's on page 39 of the appendix. CAP 9, all pupils compared with the family average. It feels like some schools are being viewed negatively when compared to schools within their families, when their performance is in fact some of the best in Torfaen. Are you concerned regarding the effect that this can have on their morale? And maybe we need a little bit of an explanation to newer members of the CAP 9 issue, if that's possible.
I'll start with the CAP 9 element, the last part. The CAP 9 is a measure, well, the point score first came in at about 2012, which was basically points were awarded to every single subject. And the gap between every grade is about 6 points, okay, is what you have to remember. They were then added together for every learner and averaged for a school. If a learner in the past did 14 qualifications, the points for those 14 qualifications counted. What schools perhaps did, and we don't have strong evidence for this, but Welsh Government stated this, that schools would enter learners for too many qualifications. They therefore created the CAP 9, so it's the best 9 qualifications any learner achieved. Importantly, literacy, science, and a maths qualification included in 3 of the subjects. What I hope that shows you is there's a credible degree of flexibility within 2/3 of the curriculum for schools to get that curriculum right for the individual learner with the remainder of those points, while still recognising that core is important to life chances. So the CAP 9, in a way, sounds this, global term, but it does really reflect on life chances of a learner. It's not like America, where you graduate from high school and get a point score yourself. Learners still get A stars, A's, B's, C's, which is where the disconnect perhaps comes in with the system. This is just about looking at schools holistically A learner wouldn't know how many points they've got. You know, why would they? They would know about the grades and the vocational qualifications that rightly contribute to it. In terms of the fairness of the system, it has always been a system that contextualises schools. If we did it on, because the cohorts matter in terms of outcomes for schools, and you will see that schools are in a way compared with similar schools rather than those in their local authority. We don't intend to make this as a league table. They're randomly organised. It's not a league table. It is outcome data compared with similar schools, which is the fairest way, rather than doing league tables of just outright performance. So there's nothing on outright.
I think I'd come in there as well to say that your point around, I don't know whether did you use the word demoralised or I think yeah, morale, wasn't it? Yeah, I thought it was something around that. Yes, yeah. If Welsh, so for a number of years we haven't, so we will have spoken to you, local authority will have spoken to members, and all you would have had would have been the school's performance and no comparator, which again then is hard to know whether the school is doing the best it can do for its learners. Now we've got this family comparator back. I think it gives, whilst not perfect, I'm sure we could all find elements in it that are not quite right. In schools, whenever we talk to them, you know, there's always something that doesn't feel quite right with it. But actually, it's just a marker. It's something that helps us to say where a school is with like schools, whether there's slight difference or not in that, which I think is important. And I also think it's important for schools to be able to, they'll know who their schools are in their family, and they'll be able to look at those schools and say, oh, they seem to be doing well in that area, I'm going to give them a ring. I might go and have a little chat about what they're doing. So it builds a bit of a network for schools as well. Now, some schools will utilise that and some schools won't. That's entirely up to them. But whilst it's not perfect and everybody will have their view on it, it gives us a comparator to have these types of conversations and to have the conversation with the school. Around morale, I don't think that this would affect that. I mean, I might be wrong, and I don't know whether that's something that you've picked up, Chair, but I think schools would know their pupils well enough to be able to talk about that on an individual level. And again, this is about how head teachers and governing bodies interpret this in a way that actually helps them as a school to improve, as opposed to anything wider than that.
Thank you. That's great. Just give you an illustration from a team around the school discussion that was had this week about some of this data. So, in order to boost your CAP9 score, a school could choose to offer a range of qualifications that will enable people to get a lower point score at individual exams. So there are there's a SWEET programme, there's alternative education programmes which act as accredited qualifications. So previously where learners would have got, perhaps they may not have passed the GCSEs, they would have got a 0. Some schools have chosen to introduce a number of programmes to enable that students get some qualifications. So that would boost the overall CAP score. There's variation within the family about how the curriculum offer appears for schools. So there's a piece of work that all schools are looking at to make sure the curriculum offer is appropriate and all learners can get an accreditation. But the conversations that we've been having with the school improvement partner and the head teacher are, we are not gaming the system or on this. This is not the way to boost a CAP9 score. It's about making sure that all learners have an appropriate qualification, but we're also making sure the more able and talented and all learners get the best outcomes they can within and that we're not going down that short-term route of putting in entry-level qualifications purely to boost a CAP9 score. And that the heads are on board with that. They recognise the importance of it.
Question 21 on page 39, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. CAP9, all pupils compared with the WG modelled outcome. 4 schools in Torfaen are above the modelled outcome line and 2 are below. No school is particularly significantly above or below this outcome. What is deemed to be significant?
Okay. You've nicely picked up on the fact that you are comparing schools in two ways in these charts. The table compares with the family. The line compares with Wales. That line could have the dots of all the schools in Wales, but they've been taken off that chart. And half will be above the line and half will be below the line. The Welsh Government don't publish the confidence intervals as they are either the line. I have used it as about a quarter of a GCSE grade. So, sorry, this is a bit more complicated. It's my interpretation of it. It's my personal interpretation of it. That 54 points is the equivalent of a whole GCSE grade difference. So that would be quite significant. Less than a quarter of a GCSE grade on average across your Camp 9 per learner, I saw as not significant, and I've used it on that basis. You can tell by a visual of looking at those dots on the line, they are not significantly above or below any. That's a position that I think is we would prefer in terms of outcomes than if we had 3 well above and 3 well below. You want balance across your schools for the sake of all learners, and that's a position that I really think we have in Torfaen. That below is within the realms of random factors that affected that within the cohort, rather than pointing to any alarm or concern that we would have about any individual school.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I mean, the data for the data for Torfaen for last summer, I think, yeah, it's really positive. I think we're in a really good place, but it's so cohort specific. And we're already having conversations with schools where they know they have a challenging cohort, and this is not always going to be the case. And that's why we always need to take all these different elements into consideration and always consider the quality of teaching and learning. This might look very different for the summer 24 outcomes. But we talk about the cohorts, about what support is there for those learners. We know we've got some schools where year 11 attendance is poor, and that will impact on outcomes. So we're talking about, well, what are you doing to support those learners to get them in, having some sort of education employment training program for post-16? How do we get those that particularly have been hit by the disruption over COVID back into appropriate educational training? So this is, I know I keep repeating it, but this is just one element of the picture. We must keep that in mind.
More point on it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Next year.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Next year, that line is likely to go up, and next year again, half the schools will be above it in Wales and half will be below, and that will be ever the case with this model.
We identified that years ago. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. The next question is on page 22, and it's Councillor Price, please.
Cap 9, comparison by thirds with the WG, model outcome line. Are some schools focusing on improving performance of certain thirds, which then affect the performance of the other thirds? Are examples of best practice being shared from schools with more consistent success across all thirds?
The first answer to the question is no, I can categorically say that schools aren't doing that, because this model was only announced in January of last year. So it is a new model for how they are assessing schools. It is, again, a pointer to schools, is what I would say, that shows you whether you are performing relatively better within individual thirds. The key, and I think the dots show this, when on the chart with the coloured dots on, when those charts first came out, there was a line of regression through them, but Welsh Government have taken that off. What you see for Torfaen schools, and it's more emphasised when you look at it across Wales, is the top third are generally very consistent amongst schools, which shows that schools generally, learners, the most able learners, will do well regardless of the schools they're in. There is more variability for the middle third, and there is the greatest variability for the lowest third. That's the key message for our schools, and we've talked about this at training that we've done with senior leaders, that are focusing on all learners, but if you address the variability for your lowest third, you will improve all as well. So it isn't at the expense of any particular group.
And just to add to that, at the expense of repeating the point I think that we've made all the way through, that we would be having these conversations about, maybe we wouldn't have been calling them thirds, we'd been calling them different groups of learners. But these conversations need to be had about the quality of learning that's provided in all year groups for different groups of learners. Okay, so not just at the end, a key stage.
So as an illustration of what I was talking about, we have a thematic review of teaching and learning each term. So that's completed by the school improvement partners. It's collated. We then discuss it in our accelerated improvement group and we issue it to the head teachers. Because within there, it talks about good practice that's seen within Torvine, so they can then speak with each other. Last time we looked at differentiation. So that's exactly this. How are you looking for your more able and talented, your middle third, and those learners that need a bit more support? So it's about that, teaching every classroom. Differentiation, I think, is such a key element of the curriculum. So we've prioritised that, and that report's just gone out to schools. I think some of the good practice, we saw it was Pontier, I'm trying to think what who else was
Crosscilliog School.
So there was, I think it was 4 schools who identified that. There was really strong practice. So that report went out to head teachers, I think about a week or 2 ago. But it's that every day, every classroom, that's the focus.
Thanks. The next question is Victoria on question 23.
Thank you, Chair. This links into the discussion. So in the CAP9 comparison by thirds with the Welsh Government modelled outcome line, for the highest achieving third, 4 schools are above expectation, 2 below and 1 significantly in line. What is meant by 1 that is significantly in line?
That's an error in the way I've written that sentence, I would say.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Question 24 is Councillor Thomas.
Pages 41 and 42. Numeracy and science measures compared with family average. What support is being provided to schools in the light of the performance in numeracy and science within Torvine?
Again, Councillor Thomas, this comes back to not just using this as an indicator for that. So we know from schools' own information to ourselves through the school improvement partner that almost all schools, it would be unusual if schools didn't have on their school development plans to develop literacy and numeracy skills in their schools, and I include primary schools in that as well. So when we're looking at this is the end measure, isn't it, of their schooling. So when we're talking about what support do we provide for literacy and numeracy as a discrete subject, but also as skills that are used across the curriculum, we're talking from early years right the way through to the end of secondary, through the PRUs, through the special schools. So there's it comes back to there's a pattern with all of these answers, isn't there? It starts with the conversation through the professional discussion. Has the school actively and appropriately identified their own priorities? Then the support offer that's available is quite I was going to use the word robust, but there is a broad, it's the word I need, there's a broad offer to support schools around the development of literacy and the development of numeracy. Now, schools can opt into that programme of development, into that professional learning for their teachers, but also for their support staff, because many of the learners we're talking about here, and the feedback we had from schools, was around us as a service offering those programmes with regards to interventions. So for those learners possibly that we see in the lower third, if we're talking this type of language, or our lower ability learners, or those learners that have specific need, our support staff in schools are absolutely critical to using those intervention programmes to accelerate literacy and numeracy skills in schools. So we've got an offer as a service that schools can opt into, but there's some really well-developed programmes, particularly across Torfaen, linking in with the ALM provision as well, for those lower ability learners around literacy and numeracy skills. We're also really, it's really important, as Andrew said, on those termly self-evaluation activities, that actually when we're looking at these skills, we're looking to see if they are being used in other subjects across the curriculum. So numeracy skills used in science, or numeracy skills used in
Geography.
DT, thank you, Chair, or geography, I couldn't think of the words then. But that, you know, that's what we're looking for as well, you know, that appropriate use in a real, authentic context of those skills over time. Schools would also be measuring this through the personalised assessments, which are offered through Welsh Government, and you would be expecting schools to be using those as to help individual learners to have the right diet, to help them to improve. So it's quite significant work around this. There's a long way to go in some of this. And many schools have identified with us that actually coming out of the COVID pandemic, that a lot of learners had, I don't want to use the word regress, but had not progressed then in some of these literacy and numeracy skills. And that was more prevalent as well through the Welsh language, which again, we can't take out. This is Welsh and English language.
Can I ask about the science, actually, because it says about the science outcome for 4 schools there, and 2 were below the grade. Is there extra support going into those schools there?
Yeah, so I'm going to capture this in general terms. Okay, so some of those schools have had significant changes in science staffing recently. And so there's been new members of staff, new heads of department that have been brought in. The schools knew these results were coming, and they knew there was professional learning needs for staff. So it was already identified through the school self-evaluation, and the schools have addressed the needs that they'd identified.
Thanks. I was just going to build on what Deb was talking about, and I think, I know that one of the key documents and everything that we really do here in terms of working with data and qualitative and quantitative information, that shaped round, and I don't know if you've come across it, but it's definitely worth reading, Welsh Government's Evaluation, Improvement and Accountability document. That really sets the scene for how we operate and how we work with schools. And as part of that, they're very clear, well, it's very clear in the document that we need to take a very much a balanced approach to how we use qualitative and quantitative information. We're not to solely rely on narrow performance measures, that we need to, when we're looking at learner attainment, to draw conclusions around schools. And I just want to try and sort of bring that to life a little bit. So as part of the thematic reviews that Andrew mentioned earlier, self-supported evaluation thematic reviews between schools and school improvement partners, in the summer term, so not too far away now, we've set the topic to look at progress in literacy for all learners across Torfaen. So that's all learners in all schools. The school improvement partners are going to be looking at that qualitative and quantitative information to help us get a picture of the progress of all learners in Torfaen with literacy. We're thinking, Andrew's going to be taking this to the Head Teacher Strategy Group, but that will be developed then into next year, probably summer term again, where we might look at numeracy, and then 3 years down the line where we'll probably look at digital skills and how effective pupils' digital skills are progressing across the authority. Now that's really useful information for us all to know. It draws on the principles of the Welsh Government guidance, which I think is really important because it dictates how we work with schools. And it also satisfies an element from the local government inspection framework, where Eston will ask us and expect us to understand the progress of all learners, not just based on exam outcomes. So I sort of did a big scene setting piece there. I hope it makes sense, but how it exemplifies how we've have taken the guidance and the wording from government documentation and brought it to life through processes that we use and work with schools.
Okay. I'll ask a supplementary on your comments, Andy. Would you look at, I know it was an issue a few years ago, the teacher assessments at primary and the baseline that secondary actually get. So within that context, would you be looking at that?
Those assessments are no longer undertaken, haven't been undertaken since 2017, 18 now, sorry, in primary end of Key Stage 2, so they're no longer available. Welsh Government no longer publish the value-added data that they used to in the past from that either.
But as you leave a secondary school, if you're based on a certain level at a primary school and then you attend a secondary school and it's not judged at that level, that's the evaluation I was asking for.
Yeah, so we look at it, I know exactly what you're pointing to. We look at it in a slightly different way now, but nevertheless, the conversation is still around our learners making the appropriate... Are we building on prior learning? Yeah, I think that's what you mean. So all schools across Torfaen are part of a cluster approach whereby they are working with an external facilitator, Professor Mick Waters, and the purpose of that is to get clusters very much to understand progression in the new assessment framework. So not having access to that kind of end of key stage data year 6. We use the new curriculum now, and they are looking at a continuous programme that builds on prior learning. And there's some really interesting things that have come out of that work. And a number of clusters have focused on, like we've talked about here, literacy and numeracy. So that's the way they're working now, Councillor Seaborn, around. In fact, it's probably more powerful, or it will be more powerful over time, because we're trying to get all the cluster involved in that discussion about what good looks like at key points. You know, where standards are, but that's part of the new curriculum, and it's part of something that's challenging for schools to grapple with, particularly individually and as a cluster. So that work will be ongoing. It's certainly not where it needs to be, but those conversations, particularly in Torfaen, have been productive.
I just wondered whether it would be linked with the evaluation and accountability framework to check the progress. Okay, thank you. Councillor Price, would you ask question 25, please?
Welsh Baccalaureate measure compared with the family average. It is this measure which has the greatest variance, where some family averages are particularly low. Is there a national reason for this being low, and how have most Torfaen schools backed the trend?
I should have pointed out in that sentence that it's nationally the variance is greatest. What I would say is because some schools do not enter learners for that measure, therefore the average will be incredibly low. The sentence here was that the families that we're comparing Torfaen schools against are generally not low. They're in a minority, and that general performance is, outcomes rather than performance, is well above those averages.
Question 26, Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to page 42 in the appendix. 5 plus A star A compared with family average. YGG is half, 10.3%, compared to family, 20.6%. Would you like to comment on the variance, as it does seem rather large?
I'll have to start. I just want to go back to it's so cohort specific, and so I can't really comment because these are individual learners that we're talking about here, and if we think this is, it appears very large on that graph, but in reality we're talking about a very small number of learners. these are conversations that I have with heads and in the team and school meetings, in the STP professional discussions, and we talk about those individual learners and their specific context leading up to the exams. I don't really want to go into any more detail than that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Jenna. You'll be pleased to hear this is the final question, and it relates to page 43. And Councillor Thomas, please.
No qualifications compared with family average. Could you just clarify the narrative there, please?
I would say that the aim there is fairly obvious and clear. We would want that to be zero for all of our schools. There are 3 of our schools which that is zero. There are 2 that are very close to zero. It is continuing to work with those schools, as Andrew mentioned quite a few questions ago, to ensure that the provision is right, and it's about learners being entered for the right qualifications, because we know that the life chances of individual learners are far higher when they do achieve some qualifications is the key element. So it's work with those schools. I did actually put in the sentence the number of learners that involves. It is very small numbers relatively in each of those schools when you look at it per 1,000, but those learners still matter. So we would want to work with those schools to ensure for the future learners who are at risk of not achieving qualifications have the support to achieve them.
I just wondered, have I read it right then? We've got 4 schools, 2 schools and 1 school there, but we've only got 6 schools in Torfaen there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be 1 at the start of that second sentence.
Okay.
So a piece of work that we've done this week, actually, I think it's quite relevant here, is about using funding to work with Torfaen Learning Zone to purchase places for Year 11 learners there, for those who are likely to come not in education, employment or training. In mainstream school, it's not necessarily the best place for them. So we're in the process of purchasing 10 spaces for them, which schools can then utilise, because we want to make sure that we've got learners in the right provision to give them the best life chances. This is something that's brand new that's happened this week, so this is just an example of where we're starting to address these data.
That point, I picked that up, I think, with the Chief Executive, the possibility of us linking with Business Connect. I mentioned to you, Andy, didn't I? And I wonder whether or not that would be an opportunity to go down the schools route. We've got lots of businesses. We've got a good Business Connect link within our one department, and whether or not we can link those. So it's worth looking into. I think that concludes our questions. Thank you very much. Can I find my paperwork a minute? I thank officers for their time and their contributions to the meeting, and ask if they would like to leave the meeting now so members are able to formulate their recommendations. Thank you very much for your contributions. Yeah, not too bad. We're getting better, aren't we? Well, usually 30, but we failed. Thank you. Members, can I please remind you that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and still being webcast. May I remind members what has been asked of the Scrutiny Committee to consider when coming up with their recommendations. Members have been asked to ascertain the strength of arrangements for supporting and monitoring school improvement in Torfaen. They've been asked to assess whether the EAS business plan has been adjusted to consider areas of underperformance in schools that will address Estin's recommendation 1, which is to improve outcomes for learners, particularly in secondary schools, and recommend any additions or amendments to the business plan that will help to strengthen its impact on the quality of teaching and learning within Torfaen. Can I ask members if they have any specific recommendations that they would like to make on the report?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Janet.
That something we discussed yesterday in pre-agenda, that the report, how can you put it, was difficult to read, and that we really need to have it in a simpler form. If this is what they say, how can lay people really understand? So a simplified version of a report would be much appreciated, I'm sure, by everyone.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Ed did sort of commit, didn't he, to, he'd said where possible he would look to simplify, so
yeah.
We'll just sort of endorse that as a committee if you want.
Yeah. Any other recommendations? I think it was a difficult report, particularly with the 2 appendixes that we had in the first place, and we would never go through all that. So, Geraint, did you pick anything up? I could ask Rex one thing.
If I just start off with, just to get an action out of the way, Ed did say that in terms of the 12 governors who'd undertaken the training, he said it's probably 1 per school, but he'd get back to you, so I'll get that down as an action. And then, still on the theme of governors, he commented that a lot of governors feed back to the EAS that they'd like it if the sessions were recorded, but he sort of stated that approximately 95% are, so there's obviously an issue in terms of the communication regarding the training available to governors. So I don't know if you want to put a recommendation around, exploring
the cluster training.
I think. And I can link in the cluster training with that as well, because they said about the cluster training was Do you want me to put like a recommendation that sort of merges both of those issues?
Yeah, there was also something around Jane's question, question 13 as well, about evaluation and triangulation, whether there was a need to do that.
Also, with that recommendation, Geraint, that you're putting together, is it, I don't know if it's possible, excuse me, to put in there about the chair of governors promoting it more, because I'm not sure in my experience that they do. I think they, chairs of governors, in my governors, and I've heard other ones talk about it in a very sort of, oh, do it if you can, I know you're very busy, you only have to do, it's very downplayed, so I don't know if we can ask them to promote it more as well.
Yeah, if you like. Obviously, I've got a note down here that one of the officers mentioned that it's not just sort of like an EAS issue. For example, it's a holistic approach is needed. Right? So obviously, like you said, with the chair of governors, you've got the school, you've got the EAS, the LA. They mentioned yourselves as well. So it's like everybody's can play a part in sort of improving the attendance and awareness of all the training. So I can knit that in as well to the recommendation we've just been discussing.
Can I bring something? So in relation to question 18, when we reflected on Eston commenting on the independent skills of learners, and the EAS don't have a particular strategy in place to build that into their strategies with schools. So I wonder if there's something there about the EAS providing more support to schools on what does that look like in a classroom at different ages and stages?
Yeah.
Liam, did you have any recommendations? No.
Nothing from me, Chair, outside what's already been mentioned.
Janet, you've got your hand? Oh, it went up and down.
Yeah, Chair, I was concerned on question 26 that Andrew couldn't give us a really good answer about the averages when we spoke about the family averages. And he was sort of very vague in the information he gave and more or less said, well, I can't give you anything. So why was that an issue that we couldn't have the variance? Because it seemed very large.
I think he explained that it was down to individuals and that he didn't want to go into too much detail about individual cases.
Yeah.
So.
Fair enough, fair point. It just seemed a little bit vague.
Yeah. I think when we go into individual cases, then sometimes they can be identified, can't they? So,
Yeah, true.
okay. Geraint?
I don't know if there's a recommendation in it, but in terms of the CSSR approach and the training, the teacher training is doing, they said that it was very positive, the feedback, you know, and you know, in terms of sharing best practice amongst schools, because currently there's 16 of the 33 schools in Torvine who are using CSSR. I didn't know if you wanted to make a recommendation around sort of trying to increase that number and promoting it. It's up to you, obviously.
Yeah, I think so, because I was going to pick them up on the report, because it actually says that, you know, it's not in a category, but when I asked the question, it's open to anybody, so whether you're in a category or not. But why put it in the report that it's not open to schools in a category? It's just a bit confusing to me, wasn't it? So, yeah, if you can formulate a question around that, I think that would be, yeah, everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Victoria?
I might contradict myself here, because I know that the reports that we had, particularly the data report, was difficult to read. I found it difficult to read, but a lot of the responses today was that the information needs to be taken in a holistic view. Yet we were only given data and a small report to scrutinise, so that maybe there is merit in having some of the thematic reports and the quantitative data to be able to fully scrutinise, because it kept referencing quantitative data and qualitative data, but we could only scrutinise what we had in front of us.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments? Jane's left for a moment, so okay, we'll take up those and Geraint will formulate those and get them out to us. We go on to agenda item 6, which is the item for the next meeting. Am I on the right one now?
Yeah.
Here we go. Can you take members through this item, please, Geraint?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure all members are familiar with this short report, just to sort of confirm whether or not you're happy to stick with your basket. In terms of Appendix 1 and 2, there's nothing on there to sort of you know, to look at anything different. So it's basically just to confirm that you're happy to go ahead with the ALN transformation, which includes the
final basket before the AGM, and we start all over again. So
and that's on the 1st of May, which obviously we've moved to. Just to confirm as well, we moved that for. It was going to be the 2nd. It's now on the 1st, but that has been sent round in terms of the diary.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody happy to take the last? That might be an interesting one, the ALN one, because it's been a while since we did the ALN. So yeah. Okay. We all happy? Liam, Janet, thank you.
Yes, fine.
We'll take that one then, and we'll think about things for our next basket. There's a juicy lot out there that we need to get to the nitty-gritty of now. We've got a little bit more access. Yeah. And there may be opportunity for a joint one with health, Janet, as well, with the early years.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, Chair.
Okay. So the date of the next meeting will be the 1st of May, as Geraint says. I'd like to close the meeting now. And as chair of this committee, may I thank members and officers for their ongoing support and contributions to our meeting. The meeting is now closed. Thank you very much.